Hello and welcome to the podcast Emotional Intelligence, your greatest asset and key to success. I'm your host, Dr. Jami Carlacio, coming to you from the greater New Haven, Connecticut area. As a positive intelligence or PQ coach, I'm committed to helping people develop both emotional intelligence and mental fitness. You'll come to regard problems as situations that help you learn and grow. PQ is a way of being and doing in the world that enables you to develop and sustain a positive relationship with yourself and others, at home, at work, and everywhere in between. Please subscribe to this podcast and tap the like button so more people can enjoy the benefits of PQ. And now, here's the show. Hello and welcome everybody to the last of our series on C for Curiosity. Today, I have with me Amanda Deitsch. Amanda helps designers, investors, entrepreneurs propel their vision and increase their opportunity and impact. Her clientele are visionaries and change makers whose work lies at the intersection of design, science, product, and environment. That sounds really awesome. I can't wait to hear more about that. Her approach is results-driven, reflective, and laser-sharp. Her style is holistic and reflective, exploring the connections between the mind, the body, and emotions. Rapid transformation is achieved by engaging the subconscious, the conscious, and a more subtle intuitional mind. Amanda partners with you to develop trust, to co-create and maintain agreements, and to develop awareness around strengths, behavior, and mindset, which is all about PQ. Having lived between Europe, the UK, and the USA, and fluent in 4 languages, she's comfortable working in a cross-cultural environment. On this journey, you will develop, with Amanda, cognitive flexibility, critical thinking, creativity, and deeper intuition, which allows you to find your path and make decisions that not only sound right for you, but also feel right. So, here is Amanda. Welcome, Amanda. It is awesome to see you today. How are you feeling?
Jami, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Yes. Well, it's my treat and it's our audience's treat because curiosity is something that I think a lot of people don't do. When they hear something, they're likely, the judge gets in there and says, no, that's not good. That's bad. And as soon as we start thinking things are bad, we lose the spirit of curiosity. So we would love to hear about how you coach your clients, how you use curiosity as a modality, and anything else you want to tell us that makes it work. Because start there.
Well, I would say that curiosity is one of the foundations of the way in which I coach people. And one of how we work is we really try and get people to be able to shift to a sense of freedom, a sense of being able to ask questions without judgment, which is really the foundation of curiosity. Little kids, we think about the 3-year-old, but why? Why? But when? But why? But how?
Yes.
And generally, the ego hasn't developed, and there's no boundaries to what they're curious about. And they have this sense of wonder. They just want to know everything. And very often we lose that as we get older. Sometimes it's through conditioning. I read my first school report in England. I moved to England when I was 8. And I found my school report, as an adult in my mother's savings at one point. And it was really interesting to read it because I was a very bright academic child. In fact, I was the first in the class. But guess what? If you read the report, you would have thought that I was middling to bottom if you read a report. And the main comment was she asks too many questions.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I don't know why teachers don't want you to ask questions.
Yeah, I'm not telling you that I was first in the class because, I was 8, for God's sake, it doesn't matter. But I'm telling you I was first in the class because it's a beautiful example of how if there was a very big discrepancy between if you read what the report said and then you looked at where the placement of the child was. And many people, I think, have grown up in an academic environment in which you were expected to listen in order to learn, but there was no questioning.
Yes.
And we reach adulthood and we probably learned really, useful tools and skills, but sometimes what we've learned may not be what we need in a changing world. May not be what is actually going to help us move through stages of uncertainty, and whether it's our lives, whether it's our life with a capital L. Is that your personal life? Is it your work life? Is it your career in the sense of needing to learn new things in order to remain relevant? And we find that our mindset gets in the way because we've stopped asking questions.
Right. So that's the key, isn't it?
Yeah,
the mindset.
Yeah, we ask the question, Jamie, we ask the question and then we shut it down straight away with judgment.
What do you mean by that?
With
we
judgment.
Ask a question and then judge ourselves?
Yes.
Like, I feel dumb, or...
Yeah, or we judge things that we hear other people say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without really evaluating them and without thinking about whether what was being said could challenge our own position.
Yes. And a lot of people don't want to be challenged. We just want to think our ideas are always great and everyone should implement them.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay, go ahead.
Anyway, just curiosity for me is something that is innate in humans. All humans are curious.
Yeah. And you're right. I think a lot of people would say now that it's better to be that curious child rather than that jaded adult, or the adult that's fearful. I don't want to sound dumb. There's some really great research on gendered communication, because that's one of my specialties, and women ask more questions. So if you're in a meeting with women and men, your executives, team leaders, whatever, and women are asking more questions, they're perceived as not as knowledgeable as men, because men ask fewer questions. And the research suggests that they don't want to sound like they don't know something. And this isn't an indictment on men or anything. It's just a fact about the gender differences in communication, which we learned growing up through expectations about gender roles.
And so you mean that women ask fewer questions or men ask fewer questions?
Men ask fewer questions. So women are not afraid to ask questions, and they're asking for knowledge. They're asking out of curiosity, but they're perceived as less knowledgeable because they're asking a lot of questions. Right. Yeah.
In fact, one of the smartest women I know, I found very interesting years ago to understand her learning style, because she would ask what we call closed questions in coaching, because she wasn't a coach. But her style of questioning was, she would ask lots and lots of very short, simple questions. That in fact, if you didn't know better, you might assume these are so simple. Why are these questions so simple? She must not be very smart. No, this is, and by the way, when I say smart, this is Harvard Law School smart.
Yeah.
She would build and very smart undergrad as well. I think Columbia, where she would build up a picture by asking many, many small questions until she understood something in its entirety. And this is a woman who's tremendously creative as well. She's also an author. And I found that very interesting to watch, because she was childlike in her questioning and unimpeded by a need to sound intellectual in her questioning. So questions are very important, but I can see that there can be this assumption that if you don't ask questions, then you must know everything about a subject, which of course we know isn't the case. But we have all sorts of paradigms that we bring with us to occasions, which influence assumptions that we have and reinforce assumptions that we have about people. So thanks for including that gender research. It's great.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about in meetings, let's say you're trying to come up with ideas, and questions often bring up answers that maybe you hadn't anticipated, that they just kind of bubble up and you don't know where it came from because somebody asked a strategic question. But I want to know more about your curiosity and how you use that in your PQ coaching, because as we know, we're riddled by judges and sticklers and avoiders and control freaks and so many other accomplices that really shut us down and bring us down this path that has never been good for us. But that's the path we know. So how do you get people on the path to the sage mind?
Well, I use a couple of different techniques. The first one is that I have worked for many years in meditation and relaxation techniques, breathwork techniques, over, nearly 25 years. And that's separate to the education I have as a positive intelligence coach. In fact, one of the things that I love so much about positive intelligence is the way that it actually brings together many modalities in an incredibly simple, easily digestible format. So what I like to do with it depends on whether I'm coaching in a group or coaching individually, but there's certain things that I will always approach. The first one is that we try and get right at the beginning of a session to what the real difficulty is. What is it that we're trying to find some sort of solution to? Where is the fear? Where is the pain? And of course, when you talk about those things, our mind doesn't differentiate between something that's happened to us and something that we're imagining. So the truth is that when you talk about and you delve into below the surface of what the superficial problem is, into the whatever the deeper fear is that's going on, those emotions come to the surface. If we think something, we experience it through a feeling.
Yes.
Everything
absolutely.
we think, we feel. And so the next thing I will do is, once we've kind of understood what it is we're trying to deal with, resolve, think about differently, I will normally lead either the group or the person through a short internal visualization. That internalizing, focusing initially on what's going on inside you, noticing your breathing, noticing sensations, noticing anything that you might be experiencing, allows the mind to reset. Then we'll work on a visualization, and that visualization will be specific to whatever we're talking about is. There'll be something that has generated for me a visualization that will be relevant. We work on that, and this may take a total of 2 to 5 minutes. And within that, we then finish that exercise. And someone is at that point ready. They've made a kind of mental shift. It shifts mindset without doing anything intellectual. It shifts the mindset. And from that point, we're ready to begin in a more creative mode. Curiosity is foundational for the people that I work with because they're normally very creative people. Or they're looking to push forward on a creative part. And I'm talking about creativity in a very broad sense. I think of creativity really as problem solving.
Well,
whether
sure,
you are
absolutely.
designing a building, or thinking about how to better dispose of garbage, or whether you are, whatever, you're finding a solution to a problem.
Right.
That's their job. That's not my job. My job is the catalyst to allow them to be able to do that work. And the other part of what I'm doing is giving them a skill set so that when they're not in a session with me, they can enter into that curious mind. Now, ways in which I really like to stimulate curiosity in the context of the actual working with curiosity, there are a lot of different ways. In a group, there's a great game that I'll often use, which I learned in our positive intelligence work, which is called I like your idea.
Yes, I love that.
I find this to be a really powerful tool. So for anyone who doesn't know it, if you're in a group and you are looking to generate an idea about something, you can use the power of the group by the first person says, this is my idea. And then it gets passed to the next person in the circle who mustn't comment except for positively. They must find something in that idea that they like, bring it forward, and then add something to it. They add it, and then it goes to the next person in the group. By the end of, if you've been through a group of, say, 6 or 8 people, you will have a far more developed set of either a solution or set of ideas around a particular area of conflict that you would never have had on your own. So that curiosity generates creativity.
Yeah, it's the 90-10 principle and the yes and principle.
Yeah,
and I absolutely love it because, you throw up a situation, and I actually did use this in an earlier podcast. You throw up a situation or a problem that people need to solve, or as I prefer to think of it, a situation in which you can come up with solutions and opportunities. And the first idea might be kind of absurd, but you say, yeah, okay, so what I like about that idea, and what I like about it is not only that curiosity and the manifesting of tons of ideas that you wouldn't have otherwise had, especially when you think kind of inside the box and creativity is outside the box. But the person who has an idea doesn't feel shut down.
That's right.
Right. And that's part of positive intelligence, is really bringing out the positive and aspects of ourselves and the strengths, but they've been kind of hidden, like under a bushel.
What I like about it, in addition to what you just said, because what I like about your idea is, what I like about your idea particularly is that you mentioned that it's a very democratic way to work. It means that those who are more comfortable with speaking up can't dominate. Yeah. Which is also good. It allows space for those that might hold themselves back. They actually, there's a responsibility that they take on in the group that they must participate. So it's beautiful. But the other thing that I really like about it is it's fast. I like to coach for results. And it's a extremely generative, quick process. I use it pretty regularly now, because I found that ever since the first time I used it, the groups with which I was using it really have enjoyed it. They wanted to do it again because they find it really valuable. On what single, one-on-one coaching, one might do some brainstorming, but brainstorming with a certain style, and that is to encourage somebody to think, as you use the word, as absurdly or out of the box, or it doesn't what way about whatever the solution is that they're trying to find, with no judgment. The idea is purely to generate ideas, as many ideas and as quickly as possible. Then, as we know in positive intelligence, we like to use the word discernment, which is the word, that the language that we use to describe when we are in the sage mentality, our best self. And that's the time to evaluate, because sometimes if we start evaluating while we are brainstorming, we start dismissing things out of pocket too quickly. And also we're trying to do 2 things at once. And what happens is it not only can send you on a negative spiral, because then what happens is it actually impedes the creative process. Absolutely. Yeah. And again, shutting people down, that impedes the curiosity, that impedes the whole discovery process. And part of one of the sage muscles is innovate, right? It's explore and innovate. And then once you've innovated, you can navigate your way. You can decide on the best way forward, and then you activate, you make decisions, and you can act on them. So often I see
that the conflict that occurs in workplaces is that people shut each other down, or they don't feel comfortable, or they don't enter that curiosity mode. It made me think, when you were talking, it made me think, let's just all pretend we're 3, or let's all pretend we're 5. And you're in a curiosity mode, and you're asking your parents 20 questions, and they're wondering when you're going to stop, but don't.
Right?
Yeah.
When we see a child, like really little children, the 18-month or even the year-old child who's just learning to walk, that little child will take a couple of steps, fall over, and just get back up again and do it again, and get back up, and they fall and they get back up, and they keep getting back up. And the reason is that there is no imposter syndrome. That's something learned. There is no sense of self at that age. There is no ego at that age. And so it really allows us to, if we can approach things from what a child has, which is a sense of a learning mindset, a curious mindset. You look how a child will explore their toes. I mean, just
I know. I was thinking the same thing. Babies like to chew their toes and stuff, and And
so there's a kind of there's another aspect, and I mentioned the imposter syndrome, which is this inner judge that comes. There are a lot of different words around these things, but the inner judge that really is that judge that is saying, what do you know? You're stupid, or you're not good enough, or why would you have the audacity to think that you could propose? It goes on and on. Everybody has that version. But what's going on at that point is you are focused on yourself.
Yes.
And there's a quote that I heard recently that I think is beautiful, which is about being humble, about humility. But the quote was a little surprising for me. And it was, humility is not thinking less of yourself.
Right.
Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking less about yourself.
Right. And I think I've worked with people who associated humility with humiliation.
Yeah.
And it's exactly the opposite. Right. So humility is this willingness to learn and be teachable.
Yeah. And think about yourself less.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And the minute your focus is on the learning, it's not on you.
Right.
So that learning mentality is the curiosity mentality. And some people want to know a huge amount about one thing, and some people want to know a lot about many things. But the idea that things are just boring is really impossible today.
Yeah, you're right. And I have actually been focusing on nature and staring at the flowers. I'm watching all of the bushes bloom, and they all bloom at different times. So while some trees are losing their blossoms, we've got some bushes where I live where they're just now blossoming. So I'm really grateful for the wave of blossoming.
Right.
And some are pink and some smell good. And I discovered some lilacs. And I also discovered that when you pick lilacs and put them in a vase, they die a lot faster than they do on the vine.
Right.
So, but yeah, just looking at nature and imagining, have you ever stared at an orchid?
Yes.
Orchids are complex and beautiful, and they're God's gift to nature. They are so gorgeous.
They're beautiful.
Yeah. So I love how you coach. I love that. Sounds so great. You really bring out the best and the most creative in people, and they probably have a completely different experience of life.
Well, I hope they do.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you said about nature, Jami, because I live in Savannah, in Georgia, and I look out at the marsh. I've lived here for about 6 years. But before that, I lived pretty much, for the last 40 years, or in a city. I lived in London. I lived in New York, and one of the things that would happen, and I spent my life in the arts, so I love culture. I love going to the theater twice a week. I love going to museums. I love going to all sorts. So when I said I was moving to Savannah, people said, "What are you going to do there?" in the sense of for culture.
Okay.
And that's a very typical city attitude.
Yeah.
Guilty of it myself. So, except that now, just as you mentioned nature, just before we began, I was looking out my window and there was a hummingbird pollinating this beautiful flower I have. I couldn't see that when I was in London. We have these incredible monarch butterflies that come through here seasonally. The moment it's the black and yellow ones, we see extraordinary birds all the time. It's the nature. It's sort of like I'm living in a David Attenborough nature film. And so if you become curious about the world around you, if you really take the time to look, you will start to learn. And that, and it doesn't matter where you are. You could be looking at a puddle. Then you'd start to, no, you'll find, there will be things, you'll look at the reflections of the water. It's really a question of how you look and then what you do with what you see.
Right. And it is a choice. It's a choice.
I think it's a choice that is actually one of the things that I work with people is to understand about energy. Because energy is something that influences our mindset very strongly. You know that if you have a terrible night's sleep, you wake up and you don't think you can do anything. You can't, you feel terrible. The world looks gray. We've all been there. It's a very, if you really had a bad night's sleep, it's a very powerful impact. And your level of curiosity and creativity probably completely tanks.
As you're thinking about how much sleep you still need.
And you don't physically feel well, you really don't feel well. Your energy feels depleted.
Right.
I'm just going to use sleep as a very obvious example because I think everybody's experienced that.
Yes.
So there's a lot that we can do to stimulate curiosity by looking after ourselves physically.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where the sort of more holistic approach comes in, because our energy levels impact dramatically what goes on in here and what goes on in our heart.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think it's a choice, because we do have to make it deliberate. There are times when it's just easy to fall back into old habits and old thinking, but that's how PQ teaches us, is you don't have to slide back into that.
No.
That you could say, no, I don't want to listen to you, Judge. I don't want to listen to you, Stickler, or whoever you are. And I just did a demonstration for people today, and I helped someone rethink his relationship to stress and everything that was on his plate by focusing on something tactile. Because once you focus on something other than what you hear between your ears, you can't have, just like the law of physics, two objects can't occupy the same space, and the same thing with thoughts, right?
It's absolutely, that's why, when in a coaching session, I'll have that shift period where we'll do some PQ reps, any number of variety. I gave one, which was, focusing on breath, but the tactile, which is extraordinarily powerful, I think, for many people. One of the things that we like to teach people, or from a point of view, again, of curiosity, is for people who are learning how to use these techniques to explore which is the most powerful for them. Because some people will find the physical, the tactile, more powerful. Others might find the auditory. Others might find listening to their breath. There are different a lot of different techniques that can be used, and they all work. Right. But at an individual level, we might find that one is more powerful than another for us. And
right. Yeah. So we need to wrap up. This has been, I could talk to you all day, Amanda.
Me too.
This is so awesome.
Very enjoyable.
And we have a very beautiful day here in Connecticut. And I think I'm going to go out and walk my dog and smell the lilacs. Yes, they're still on the trees, but just barely. They're just going away soon. But
I miss lilac. It's one of my favorites. And
mine
we don't
too.
Get it down here.
Yeah, they're just amazingly. They smell so amazing. So if you are interested in getting a hold of Amanda, all of her information will be in the show notes. And as usual, you can contact me. My information is in the show notes. And please like and subscribe to this podcast so that more people can see it and hear it. And until next time, I'll see you in the PQ gym.